Good morning, everybody. I'd particularly like to welcome back the people who had a midterm or a paper. I have a very restorative attitude towards that kind of thing. It's definitely not, hey, get out of here, you missed class. But come back. And I do know that there are other courses going on. In some cases, you have to take them, regrettable as that is. Little announcement, yesterday was the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, 1965. That was the day that the Montgomery to Selma March took place, and it was a good example of how the paradox of repression works. These marchers were very, very brutally clubbed and badly dealt with when they got to the other side of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and so the next Sunday the whole country basically was there with a lot of religious authorities and people like that. It was kind of a climax of the civil rights movement. Well, who, Edwards? You know, there's actually some pretty good candidates out there. I don't know what's going on. I remember one campaign where one famous commentator said if the Lord had wanted us to vote, he would have given us candidates. But now there actually are a few. Those of you who were at my little conversation with the Jesuits on Thursday, I'd like to hear how it seemed to you. Yeah, and you don't have to make nice. Just tell me straight up. I also wanted to announce that there's a handbook called the Handbook of Peace and Conflict Studies, and I think this year's edition is going to be very, very good because it's co-edited by a fellow who's been doing them all along, and Johan Galtung, and he's one of the best we've got. So Wabel and Galtung, Handbook of Peace and Conflict Studies is just hitting the stands. On Tuesday, of course, we're going to basically have a review for the midterm, and what I often do for those is nothing. I just come in and say, okay, here I am, what's on your mind, what you like, what didn't you like, what do you not understand. What I think I'd like to do this time is take half an hour for a presentation by one of the people who's involved in the tree sit that's going on right now, the Oak Satyagraha. There's a famous elderly tree-sitting woman, I understand, Redwood Mary, and one of my students is going to try and get a hold of her and have her come talk to us. So I think that probably will substitute in inspiration and immediacy of contact what we otherwise would have gotten by the extra 30 minutes of going over the terms and so forth. So if that sounds okay to you, then what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit more about restorative justice, if you don't mind, and then just a little bit about animal rights, and then start talking about environmental struggles and put the spotlight on India and do the same thing that I did with the European anti-militarism, which is to look at one of those middle era campaigns that took place in between Gandhi and the modern age. So we have kind of a sense of that historical continuity, and the issue will be, the organization, the movement will be the Chipko or hugging movement. So am I going to cover all of this? I have no idea, but it's okay. I think some of you were expressing to me that we are. There's a lot that we're not getting to, but my main concern, I think the most useful thing that we can do is have a frame of reference in which to understand all of this stuff. And if we can accomplish that, then you can go out and learn the stuff and pick up on what's going on your own. Of course, you can't have a frame of reference without any content. So that's why, and I do think it's inherently good to know our history, who's done what, and learn from that history what has gone wrong, and so forth. I was actually looking over the weekend at the research report that Christine Schweitzer and other people had done for Nonviolent Peace Force, and I really do feel that that's a significant contribution to the advancement of peace, just to know the history and to be able to sift out from that history what works in what circumstances and what does not. It's really a very valuable document, and I think I emailed you a link, didn't I? So you can go right to that in the Nonviolent Peace Force page. All right, so given that I can't possibly cover everything I mean, but I can cover some things. Another Freudian slip. I can't possibly cover everything that I even wanted to, so we're not even going to try. Any questions that are left over from last time would you like us to go into before I start? Yes, Arby. Yeah. In a sense, it could. I mean, I can understand Arby's question. It was coming off that 4-stage list that was presented by the Gene Sharp community in that film, Where There's Hatred. It has different titles, so we saw the one called Where There's Hatred. And step 4 was, after the revolution, we have a seat right here, Sati, if you want. Okay. After the revolution, you go and restore society, build it back up, and create the world that you want. Gandhi had said a long time ago, that will never happen. I'm going to be taking a big philosophical overview. If you go for the negative first, you will not get around to the positive. The thing is to get to the positive first and then let the negative kind of shatter itself against you. So, and I think we have seen this and will continue to see it in campaign after campaign, especially the insurrectionary ones, that if you try to simply overthrow a regime and say that then you're going to rebuild a new world, it doesn't happen. You have to try to rebuild a new world, and the regime will get in your way and say, hey, we don't want this. Then you have your nonviolent moment, and then it works. So, Arby's question, how does restorative justice figure in? That's interesting, because I did say last time that I would characterize the current state of the movement as scattered constructive program with very little obstructive program. So, in a sense, yes, but in a sense, and I've made this very clear in my book, I think chapter 6 is on this stuff, in a sense, even restorative justice is after the fact and not enough, because you're waiting until somebody has committed an act against the general welfare, and then you're saying, okay, you've identified yourself as a miscreant, how do we get you back in? But by itself, that wouldn't really be the heart and soul of constructive program. By itself, and I don't know if you've seen, you remember the Wheel of Nonviolence that's in the book? If you look at crime as a problem, the Gandhian answer to this was education. And because I guess what we're saying is that commit a crime against your fellow human beings is a form of ignorance. It's the failure to understand that to hurt another person, you're hurting yourself, which we now have some scientific evidence for. In a way, I kind of regret it, because who needed scientific evidence if you don't have the imagination to see this? I don't know. Okay, never mind my petty little complaints. But certainly to hurt another person and think that you're benefiting yourself from that is a form of ignorance, and the appropriate way to address it is preventatively through education. It's interesting that you can also use education after the crime has been committed, and it works very well in that category also. I was just talking with Mansoura, who works with us in Meta, and she was just hearing a program about, well, I guess there's a fellow who attacked a gay, lesbian, LGBT house here in Berkeley, and he fortunately didn't hurt anyone, and he was, the judge sentenced him to an anger management class. which if it works is a very deep form of re-education. So we were sitting there sipping chai, watching the crows on the FSM area there. Didn't see you there today. And asking ourselves, is this restorative justice or retributive justice? And we came to the conclusion that it's kind of a mixed bag. It's definitely restorative to say to somebody, you have a problem with your anger, you need to control it. But it's retributive to say, you have to do that. We are sentencing you to this. The best way, if you could possibly do it, was to bring a person to the point where they say, ooh, I have a little problem with anger, don't I? I wonder if you can help me with that. Which, if you remember, the letter that I was reading you last time, and I wasn't even reading you the most heartbreaking parts of many letters that I've gotten from this fellow in this high security prison in Florida. This does happen to people. They wake up and they say, whoa, I've gotten myself in trouble. I need to get out of it. And then in the case of most people, like that friend of mine in Florida, there's no way. We have no facilities to help that person. Okay. Lengthy answer to a reasonable question. So one of the reasons I realized just over the weekend, it was a very exciting, creative weekend for me. I realized that one of the reasons that I like restorative, and I like it so well that I can spell the terms in this case. I actually think that this is one of the very rare cases where we got to make up the vocabulary. You know, there's a few others, like we call ourselves progressives. The rest of the world does not. They call us avocado eaters, body-piercing New York Times reading liberals, things like that. But at least in our own discourse community, we made up a term for ourselves that works much better. And obviously, people outside the community don't like it, because I had one of them say to me one time, so if you're progressive, what does that say about the rest of us? And I said, yeah. And it's a little bit like that with this set of terms too. Now, they don't say that they're retributive. They talk about the difference between rehabilitation, which I feel is a very weak form of restorative, versus punishment. And you may be aware that California, which had a fairly progressive, there I've used that word again, and I'm glad I did. California had a fairly progressive criminal justice approach in which it was mostly oriented around rehabilitation. And in 1976, there was a statewide decision that from now on, the purpose of the Criminal Justice Department of the state of California will be punishment. Just waiting for that. But restorative is a much more positive term. It brings about the notion, the image that there's something there to restore. The person had something, they lost it, and it can be restored. Before I talk more about the term, which I'm going to do in just a little bit, I wanted to point out one of the connections between the criminal justice area and other areas of violence or nonviolence. I was very, very saddened when the Holocaust Museum was about to open in Washington. I was saddened that they even opened the thing, because I think it was the wrong way to go about memorializing and restoring. But anyway, okay, that's another issue. But when it was about to open, the German government said, could we also put a museum next to that, which would be a museum of modern Germany? And you can see what Germany is doing now since that dreadful era, which was as dreadful for us as it was for you. And immediately that permission was denied. Now that really shocked and irritated me. Fortunately, I conquered anger, so no joke. But I think this was like a huge mistake. This is like blocking the door to restoration, to rehabilitation. It infuriated, well, of course it couldn't have, but what particularly got me was, you know, I had spent a fair amount of time in Germany, and I felt that there's so many good things going on in that country, and they were really coming off that era in a beautiful way, and it could be a lesson for all of us. But no, we have to have this attitude that restoration is not possible. So that shows you the connection between what we do domestically and what we do internationally. There's even a connection. We're going to be talking about animal rights in a little bit. And one of the early English philosophers on animal rights said that if we are cruel to animals, we will be unjust to one another as well. That's the importance of it. So whether you believe that animals have souls or not, even if you don't go there, and we will be going there in a minute, but even if you don't go there, if you allow people to practice cruelty to animals, they'll practice cruelty to one another. It's not a coincidence that the CIA maintains hunting lodges where people can go out and kill animals and discuss for their next move. Yeah, Matthias? Yeah. Yeah. It's yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the same energy from our dynamic standpoint. It's the same action whether you hurt an animal or a person. And guess what, folks? A person is an animal, but it's an animal with a PhD. And I suppose this gets us back to the hero of the Uproar movie. It's, you know, we were for life, they were against it, and that's why we won and they lost. So Johann Galton's definition of violence is anything that inhibits the fulfillment of life. Actually, that isn't his definition. It's my version of his definition. But I'll talk it over with Johann next time he's out here. I have a special role in his life. I help him out with Greek and Latin terms whenever he needs them. You know. Anyway, back to the point. Now, of course, there were specific political reasons why they didn't want that alternative complementary museum built. And that's because in order to keep on carrying out the aggressive foreign policy that we as a nation have, we have to be able to construe it, to put it in a framework of redemptive violence. And the conspicuous act of redemptive violence in our national history recently was the liberation of Europe at the end of World War II. And that's why there was a president who has the same name as this president, but he was a little bit earlier. He's actually the father of this president. Okay. In 1991, when we were starting to bomb Iraq, he got on the radio and said in a voice where, you know, I almost never listened to these guys, but I happened to catch him saying this as riding in a van. He literally was trying to sound like Eisenhower. He literally was kind of impersonating Eisenhower. And he said, the liberation of Kuwait has begun. As though Iraq was going to take over the world and convert us all into some terrible totalitarian thing, and they were liberating us. And I can see you smirking. I agree with you, this is ridiculous, but the fact is this is the way people think. And I don't think that's the word we want. This is the kind of knee-jerk reaction that people have. A part of them wants to be violent. A part of them needs an acceptable moral framework in which to put that violence. So we have to keep on reliving World War II because we say to ourselves that World War II was the good war. Remember that film, The Good War, and those who refused to fight it. Actually, it wasn't such a good war. We didn't fight it for the right reasons, but I don't want to get into that whole thing, but I'll tell you what books to read later on if you're interested in really getting demoralized. So what am I saying? There were specific reasons why we have to maintain this mythos, this mythology, that in fighting that particular war, we were fighting against evil, and all other wars that we fight are the same as that war. It's ridiculous when you bring it out in the open, so what's the solution? Don't bring it out in the open. Just keep using images and frames and let people react. So But okay, even if you take away that particular political reason, there's an underlying reason, and that is that we do not believe, as a culture at this point in time, we do not believe in restoration. We do not believe in the regenerability of the human being, and actually, in theological terms, we are a deeply pagan nation. We do not fit in the Judeo-Christian framework in terms of our real controlling processes that some of you are studying in a complementary course to this one. So this is all rather long-winded. Obviously, I needed to get something off my chest. Thank you. I feel a lot better now. What I'm trying to show is that, as Matthias was pointing out, these things all go together. If you can bring yourself into a frame of mind in which it feels acceptable to you to commit cruelty against any form of life, it will spill over into other forms of life. This is the basic dynamic there is the same. Hence the importance of restorative justice as a constructive program which is rather unconfrontational. You know, it does not, what I like are stealth programs which are going to overthrow the entire paradigm, but they don't know it. My model here is the spinning campaign. Or if you remember the Gandhi film, I showed a piece of the Gandhi film in a 2-day course. It was the one where the British Viceroy is talking about the Salt March, and he says, it's going to take more than a pinch of salt to bring down the British Empire. I've always thought I missed my calling, but how wrong he was. You know? And that's the kind of campaign on one level that I like. On one level I like transparency, it should be out in the open, but on another level I think it's counterproductive to push people's buttons, and it's much more productive to create something positive which they will be attracted to, and you will undercut them. So restorative justice, to repeat, goes right to the heart of the whole commitment to violence that runs through our culture, but it does it in a way that's not provocative, it's not confrontational. It still isn't getting very far, because if you want to lose a campaign as a politician in this country, the easiest way to do that, sexual misconduct will only work under certain circumstances. That's peculiarly American system there. But the one thing that will absolutely get you diselected faster than anything else is for you to be soft on crime. Or even if you're not soft on crime and they say you are, and the timing is right, you will be absolutely crashed. So that shows you how deeply embedded in our value system this punitive arrangement is. Okay. Zoe. Yes. Zoe's bringing up a very good point, which I touched on with the Jesuit friends. Security. I mean, the latest thing that I wrote for Meta's blog was about security and the new concepts of security, which are called, they used to be called total security, now it's called human security, I learned last week. But also a complementary aspect is common security, as opposed to, there is no real word for it, but we might call it separate security. Separate security is stating, I'm going to keep you so terrified that you won't dare attack me. So you're insecure, I'm secure. The more insecure you are, the more secure I am, which we would not believe for even 2 milliseconds. But common security says, in order for me to be secure, you have to be secure. If you're secure, you will have no reason to attack me. And yes, you're absolutely right. This, on one hand, it's the sense of retribution that we got even, and on the other hand, it's this false sense of security that we put the bad people away. Who was it? One second, Matthias. Somebody, I think it was Solzhenitsyn or somebody like that, said the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every human being. And the whole mistake is to think that it runs through the community in some way. So we can put the bad human beings here and the good human beings here, separate them out, and we'll have paradise. But in that very act of separation, we're tearing paradise apart. Yeah.
It's just amazing to me, to pretend that the government right now and the course they run is to go into very, very simple emotional levels.
Yeah.
You're either with us or against us,
Yeah.
good and evil.
Yeah.
And it works because people don't have to get into any concepts, they don't have
Yeah.
to work for something, they don't have to stay open. It's as simple as,
Yeah.
white,
Yeah.
evil, punishment or
Yeah.
so.
This problem has often been brought up in the progressive community, namely one of the problems with the present regime is the simplistic black and white polarizing thinking. And so the next step in our own thinking is, well, if we get people to think about things in a subtler, more complex way, this would solve the problem. I'm mostly convinced of that, but part of me is so pessimistic that I think you have to get people to have a good knee-jerk reaction instead of a bad knee-jerk reaction, and then we can get them to a sophisticated level.
I'm a little bit stuck on how you said that society has tended to reject the notion of rehabilitation as a whole. It seems that, I mean, maybe it's from my lived experience, but it seems that on a smaller scale, like as in a family member,
Yeah.
if a family member commits a crime,
Right.
it seems that the family is really towards rehabilitation.
Right.
And at some level it does exist. And why
Yeah.
is it that on the broader level we kind of reject this, but it's still there on the individual?
Okay, yeah, Ashley's point is really excellent, and I think there's 2 aspects to it. One, I'm being kind of simplistic when I make sweeping generalizations like that, and it's been often pointed out to me that I do that, but somehow it hasn't helped. I keep on doing it. I don't know why. Or it's partly trying to get through a lot of stuff and pull out the main things and have them be clear. I will often speak in exaggerated terms. And clearly it is the case that there are pockets within our society where restoration is the norm, and clearly you're right, Ashley, that tends to be the case in the family. And that's part of the point with restorative justice, is that you try to rehumanize the process so people deal with one another more like family members. And any of these little charts that you've seen, which kind of spell out, okay, here's restorative approach, here's the retributive approach, you'll see that the first thing that tends to come up is in the retributive approach, the crime belongs to the state, whereas in the restorative approach, it belongs to the victim. And if they're really sensitive and sophisticated, they'll say it belongs to the torn relationship between the victim and the offender. Hold on just 1 second. Now, one of the ways of looking at what the bad process that's going on here is that the values of the state are seeping down